the Refined Strength podcast. Thank you for listening. And I'm super excited about today's guest. I have Dani LaMartina. Did I say her last name right?
You did. You
Oh,
did.
awesome. Okay, cool. I have Dani LaMartina. She is a women's physique pro, and she is also you're a DPT, correct? You have a lot of letters after your name. So why don't you tell the listeners who you are and also just what you do?
So as Rachel hit it, I'm a women's physique pro. I competed at Olympia last year. Apparently, neither one of us can talk today. I'm a doctor of physical therapy, CSCS, kind of all of that. But really, what I've done in the last probably 10 years is take my practice outside of working in a traditional clinic. I work pretty much exclusively with iron sport athletes right now. So bodybuilders, powerlifters, strongman. My background is I started in powerlifting and transitioned to bodybuilding and moved very, very quickly within bodybuilding. So it's been really fun to kind of take my, professional skill set into a role that needs it. But most of what I do isn't like a normal corrective exercise, like, oh, here's some exercises to do before your
Here's
session.
some bands.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like we've all seen that. Um, Really what I do is I make training rehab itself, which means, especially for people I'm working with remotely, I have to know exactly what I'm looking for, exactly what I'm looking at, and get very creative with solutions because as we train, our body really starts to change in terms of its shape and patterns, and how do we offset that and also let our strengths still be our strengths, if that makes sense.
Wow, there's so many things I want to ask you to like dive into all of that. So you work mostly with athletes, and how did you get to that point? Like, were you ever in that boring space of like
Yeah.
just kind of doing general population and then you moved on to athletes? How did that transpire?
So I'll back up a little bit. I started working in PT clinics when I was 15. So I've been in around PT clinics. I'm now 36. That's 21 years. That's a long time.
Yeah.
Um, when I first got in, I was kind of convinced that PT kind of sucked and I didn't want to be a PT. Long story made short, I found an awesome clinic that really mentored me into thinking differently. I worked there as an aide throughout college and afterwards, spent a couple years working more, and then went to grad school. I went back to work with them after grad school. And that was kind of more of like the traditional model. You see a patient every mini per hour. And they were good compared to other places. But because I was competing in powerlifting at the time, I got picked up to write for a major powerlifting website called Elite FTS and started doing remote consults from there. And honestly, Rachel, I feel like my niche kind of found me where because I was competing at a very high level and I wasn't just giving everyone clamshells and like let out band walks, things kind of happened organically. And over time, I left the traditional clinic to rent space in a gym. And even beyond that, I felt like there was enough of an online pull. And I was getting better. I was getting people in person better too quickly to pay my rent in the building. That I just transitioned to fully remote. And man, I love it. There's such a world of opportunity within the performance realm.
Did you ever think that you would be able to make PT a remote job?
The, I mean, yes and no. Like I was online coaching through grad school and I was doing some consults at the time, but what I didn't realize was that I even wrote an article for Elite FTS at one point because people were like, oh, how do you get to like work with all these iron sport athletes? And I was like, I don't. Most of what I do is like I see Medicare, I see the high school athlete, I see the mom that, wants to pick up her kids without her back pain.
Mhm.
And now, 8 years after I wrote that article, I look at it and I'm like, no, 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 I'm doing the thing that I thought I was never going to be able to do, which is really
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. I remember when I first, so before I got into fitness, I was an actor and I was doing like acting, dancing, singing, stuff like that. And I was really into it, but I had started working out and finding my own strength and realizing like, oh, this would be really cool to like do this. Like I joined like a bodybuilding boot camp thing that was run
Nice.
by a bodybuilder and his wife. And at the time, this was 2012. I didn't even know that bodybuilding was a thing you could do. I was like
Yeah.
a competitor. But then I learned more about it and I realized like maybe I want to do what they do, but I want to do it for actors and like performers
Mm.
and like work with performers on their fitness and health. And then shortly after that, I found out that those people don't care about their health very much at a local level. Like I was just in Seattle. When you're talking like big time celebrity, it's a different story. But even then, that's like the focus on health and longevity and performance just is not there in a way
Right.
that like made sense to like how I saw myself at the time. So I think it's really cool that you were able to let that niche find you, because I think a lot of people they get really pigeonholed, especially when it comes to something like PT or any kind of medical practice or health at all, and
Yeah,
they let themselves just keep doing what's safe, keep doing what's like makes sense, what my degree taught me, and don't go outside of that.
for sure. And you can probably resonate with this too, where like you look at anyone, whether it's, content they produce or maybe you're just around them in person, their energy is different. You can tell when someone generally like genuinely loves what they do
Mm-hmm.
versus someone that's doing it because that's the way they think they should be. And
Or because they've seen others do it and make a lot of money at it or look like really successful and they think, oh, I could do that. I think
right.
we see a lot of that right now in just online coaching in general.
It's funny because I think everyone's social media content looks the same, or like they're very
Yeah.
similar things, right? And
Yeah.
like to me is one of those things where if I'm hiring a coach, if their stuff or their content looks exactly like a carbon copy of so many other coaches, there's nothing to me that says that's someone I want to work with.
Yeah. I want someone who it's like there's only so much reinventing the wheel you can get when
Right.
it comes to content for fitness. But at the same time, like if you really look and observe people and what they choose to post and how often they're posting all the things on their feed, on their story, how they're actually speaking, you can really see the difference between someone who's regurgitating and someone who knows what they're talking about. One
But
thing I've like always had a big imposter syndrome about is just like not wanting to say anything that I truly cannot speak about without a script, because it's just I don't want to be that disingenuous person.
totally. It's funny. I spoke at a conference a couple years ago, and all the speakers had we are like, our keynote talk or whatever. But then within each different subtopic, like rehab, they had a rehab panel where they got us all in the room, a bunch of people in there, and they said, here's a problem, solve it on the fly.
Oh,
And you
like
can
in front of an
tell,
audience?
oh yeah, and you
Oh,
can tell
okay.
people who like literally think very well and can think on their feet, who actually coach, and the people who are
Mhm.
just really good at using a lot of big words. And again, when someone's a master at their craft and they love what they do and they care about you, I think as coaches, like we can know the difference, but as consumers, I think it's very important to really find the ones that are their own person. And their
Mhm.
media might not look as pretty as others, or I don't know. I think there are a lot of like red and green flags, but it's always just interesting to me as like on the outside, I'm like, I've never had to do any marketing because what I do is so different. Um,
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, when I watch your stories or look at your content, like you're definitely like your own person. You're not using any fancy templates or like design designed or
and the
curated
designs.
content, like, and that's not a bad thing. It's just interesting to see like something like that, someone listening to this who's maybe in a similar space that of either of us or want to be there. It's like, yeah, that stuff looks great and it's a way to maybe get more eyes on you or maybe like add a level of professionalism, whatever. But if you don't know the content and if you don't know the knowledge and if you don't have the experience to practice it, then your marketing doesn't matter.
100%. Actually, I would be really interested to hear your take on like how do you differentiate or when you're looking at coach's content, do you have certain things that you look at and you go, okay, yeah, they know their stuff, or wow, this person is a parrot.
Yeah, I mean, I follow a lot of coaches, right? Most of
Right.
my friends are coaches. Like I'm sure for you too, the same thing. Coaches or athletes, whatever, at different phases of their journey in both. And I like I'll see something that someone posts and then I'll see someone else like almost exactly like replicate the same content, but in slightly different words. Or I'll
Mhm.
see kind of a trend among like hot takes that people are making and posting. And I don't think that everyone is doing that on purpose, but I think it's really easy to do that when you're consuming a lot of content and when you're like just listening and watching and scrolling all the time.
For
And
sure.
honestly, the people that are really busy with clients and work are usually the people that don't have that happen as much. Like I sign on to Instagram like a few times a day to respond to DMs and to post my content. And I try to be like regular about that because it is a big part of how I can get business is just being out there. But it's also a big part of like supporting my team and my culture and my brand, the podcast. So there's multiple reasons I am on Instagram. And I think the people that are regurgitating a lot of content, they're the people that are super active and on there all the time, scrolling, commenting, just doing all the things. And I think that's a big indicator of someone. It's hard to see like at surface level, but I definitely, that's the thing I see the most is the people that are super active. They tend to also maybe even accidentally regurgitate content of others.
That's really, really interesting. I think that brings up a great point about coaching in general, and that I think that generationally we're seeing a lot of people who want to feel seen and want to feel
Mhm.
heard. And I think social media is being abused in a way to kind of heal what I would think is more of a soul wound than
Yeah.
actually coaching people, right? Like there are coaches like
Yeah.
that who genuinely care about their clients, and there are coaches who are like trying to outmarket other coaches rather than actually serving the people coming to them. And I think there's a deep sense of security you can pick up on in someone that's either there or not. And the frequency and how loud those voices are definitely two KPIs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, people also see success in so many different metrics and KPIs, like how many followers you have, what engagement you have, how many people repost your stuff. And I think those are great data tools, but just like the data that we collect from clients, like I collect a lot of data from my clients, and that has increased so much from when I first started coaching.
Mhm.
And but not all of the data matters all of the time. And
Right,
the scale weight doesn't matter much of the time, especially in an off season or a building phase or a maintenance phase, but everything else matters a lot more. Whereas in a contest prep, scale weight matters a little bit more. But at the end of the day, it's still your physique and your biofeedback that matters a little bit more than that. And
for
I
sure.
think if you're only looking at your social media engagement in terms of like how successful you are or how close you are to reaching a certain level of your coaching, that you're missing the forest for the trees. It should
Absolutely.
be a holistic view, like a big picture view of not only those things, because those things do matter in some ways, but like how are your clients feeling? One of the things that I really like that I've done for pretty much the whole time of coached is I ask people for wins from the week.
I see that in your check-ins. I love that.
Yeah, because it makes them, it forces them to like wrap the week up and like remember things they're grateful for. Do you have anything like that in like the PT and like corrective world that you do, and maybe not a win or like gratitude, but like anything to help people just self-discover a little bit?
Always. Yeah. So again, a lot of what I do is very, very thorough. I don't really even know how to talk about it from like the PT corrective side, but the check-ins that I have with people are, I mean, again, I think what you and I both really hit on with our clients is that our psychology matters and the things that we think about really, really matter. And they play an enormous role in the shift of our nervous system. And again, like we kind of, I don't want to sound weird, but like we kind of do create our reality to an
Oh
extent.
yeah,
Like if we're
absolutely.
thinking a lot of positive things, we're probably going to have a little bit more of a positive externally and internal. And that's going to play out in the physiology and how our neurotransmitters change, all the weird science stuff. But I ask people all the time, what strategically, what were the hardest and then what were the things that felt the best this week? And I
Yeah.
always want to end on that kind of major high note. So I'll ask from a movement perspective and personal,
Mm.
just to kind of again coach the whole person. Because at the end of the day, like whether it's contest prep from the nutritional standpoint or training from the someone who's been in chronic pain for 10 years and wants to squat again standpoint, we're coaching people and not textbooks.
Yeah. Well, and like you can learn so much from your degree, your CSCS, the textbooks, the mentorships, even. But if you're not actively getting the experience, there's just like you don't have anything to really back up what you're having the client do. And you're not learning how to change them. Like,
Right.
when you first started online coaching and like taking your business remote, were you doing that? What was the hardest? What was the best?
I was, but I think that's because, from a clinical standpoint, again, I've been working with people for years who'd been
Yeah,
in
years before that.
there's a whole realm of pain science, which is a different, Pandora's box to get into. But we learned very quickly in the soft science clinic, medical world that how we talk to people matters and how what people think about matters. And so the minute you walk into a room, whether you're a coach or an athlete or just someone walking into, an empty room, the minute you walk into the room, you're going to change the energy and you're going to create what you put out. And
Yeah.
so I have to collect myself, if I'm walking into a clinic door or walking into a treatment room door, collect myself and think about how I want to show up there. And I think that goes very much the same for us as coaches. We might have a very long day, but we get on a Loom video and the energy that we put on that Loom video and how we show up to our athletes matters because that's
Yeah.
also kind of how they show up for us and how they show
Yeah.
up for themselves too. So, I mean, to me, I think the soft science is like, I hate to say it's the easy part of what I do, but like, you probably find this too. It's like, if I treat people well, if I make sure they're heard, seen, and safe, it goes a really long way.
Yeah, because even if they're having a hard time, like if someone's frustrated with lack of progress or what they think is lack of progress, or
That's
if
the big one, what they think.
what they think is lack of progress,
Yeah.
even if someone's frustrated, and if I can read their words, but also read between the lines, and then look at their data and their pictures and all of the things, and if I can find some things to show them that they haven't seen before, or they just are not capable yet of seeing, that could change their whole perspective on their progress. And like
Absolutely.
I'll regularly get those emails back after I send that Loom video of like, see, this is what I'm seeing. You need to see it, right? I'll regularly get those emails back being like, wow, I never saw it that way. I can't believe you can see all of those things. Like,
You're
yeah,
like,
this is what I do. I like my job is to see these things.
and it's one of those things where I know your athletes know they're lucky to have you. Like most people who work with their coach and stay with their coach are like, oh, I'm really happy to be with my coach and I like
Yeah.
them. But like as another coach, again, I hope your athletes know how lucky they are to have you. As a coach,
Yeah.
just really refine the skill set, not only on the science side, but isn't so like, sitting oh, we gotta the carbs and micronutrients that you forget to actually like coach people.
Yeah.
Um, there's such a tendency, I think, towards over sciencing at times. Again, like I'm a huge science nerd. Like you know me. Um,
Have you ever, has there been a point for you where you have realized you were maybe doing too much and you needed to step back and do less as a coach to just, to like impact more?
yeah. Absolutely. That's something that I have a hard time with
Yeah,
because
same.
uh, I realize that we can have, volumes of knowledge, but what someone else can actually act on in one given week might be like two data points. And especially for me, if someone is paying a lot of money to work with me, there's a pressure to deliver value. And
Hmm.
what I perceived as value was more information. What they
Yeah.
perceive as value might be one or two change in action items rather than like, here's a deluge of here's a pelvis model. Let me move it around and show you what's going on.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, definitely. I think I saw that I had that pressure a lot more earlier on in terms of like feeling like every week they're like this client wants a change and I need to like, you know, oblige them. And it's not that I coached like that a lot in the beginning, but it was more just like knowing that that pressure was there and that if I didn't make a change, I'm risking the client feeling like I'm not doing my job or I'm not doing enough for them. And so over the years, I've definitely learned not just how to make less changes, because that's obviously happened, but it's mostly about like how to help people understand what like the beauty of maintenance and the beauty of like consistency and sometimes changes are not like a lot of people get into bodybuilding. Like I work with a lot of first time competitors or new people to competing, and they just think like it's all about macros and cardio and or meal plans and cardio. And there's so much more than that. And really, it's been kind of a fun challenge to really help people understand more about themselves and
Mhm.
understand things about their habits that can make them better or worse. And setting boundaries has been a big one. Some of my clients that are like that I see as some of the most successful clients in various ways, especially in like their growth seasons or whatever, or over the course of time that they've been with me for years is watching them change as people and then
Yeah,
seeing how that affects their fitness and their health.
for sure. I was just about to ask if you were to give one big nugget that people think it's macros and cardio, if you were going to be like, hang on, let's not neglect blank, what would that thing be?
I don't think there's one big nugget. I think it's so much. It's sleep, it's habits, it's posture. It's like, people totally just underestimate the power of all of those things. It's
Hmm.
also like meal timing. Like, I can't tell you how many people I've had come on with me thinking they needed this crazy change, or they needed a fat loss phase, or they needed drugs, or they needed a new training program. And all they really needed is, or they needed supplements or something. All they really needed is to change their nutrient timing because it was shit before and now it's not. Because like I know what you need as an athlete.
Right.
Because that change is a big thing. I think if there were one big nugget, it would be like stress and just the power of stress management and perception, because
Yeah.
that seeps into everything and it kind of connects to everything: our digestion, our hormones, our sleep, our nutrient utilization, our performance, our training, like all of it.
Yeah, that's a big one. I think, I mean, it sounds like all of the other components, I don't want to say hinge on stress, but it almost sounds like the stress. And again, we could talk about the science behind this. Stress definitely dictates the degree to which those things are optimal or
Yeah.
not.
How do you see that in terms of like how stress affects things from your end, and what are some ways that you feel like you've really mastered how to help clients with that? Because I know it affects stress, and just like I think anxiety is a big one that kind of like goes hand in hand with that, especially when you're talking about rehab, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to even pull back right now too. And we hear the word stress or anxiety, and I think because we're so inundated with information about it, it kind of like glances right over people and like, oh yeah, stress. But
Mhm.
like, no, really. It's enormous. And I hope that anyone listening to this really recognizes the power of stress in terms of there's distress and there's eustress. There's bad stress that causes us to a judgmental state, and there's eustress that pushes us towards growth.
Hmm.
From the rehab and training side, there are a lot of things. Again, I work with people who have been training for a very long time, and there's a sense of identity role confusion where when they can't do the thing that they really identified as, now there's enormous, their biggest pain point is the sense of loss of their
Yeah,
identity. They are. And so, of
that's
course, they're
huge.
stressed. This thing that they kind of hold so tightly to all of a sudden is feeling very, very fragile and
Yeah,
trying
like
to
it's
hand off
slipping away.
right. And so handing over the keys to someone is really, really hard. Um, so whether or not they're willing to fully trust me is a big part of managing that stress. Right now, there's a lot that I can do on the coaching side to, kind of massage that situation. But from a purely science standpoint, we know that stress is going to increase pain sensitivity. It's going to decrease the threshold at which pain neurons are going to depolarize in the spinal cord and send that up to your brain. It's going to increase the amount of pain, like signaling down from the brain. It's going to
Yeah.
increase your anxiety around a training session. If you bend over to pick up a bag of groceries and you have this slight awareness of the thing that was your pain point, your day kind of spirals. And
Hmm.
so it really does frame our bodies function from the like sympathetic parasympathetic standpoint. Again, there's a lot of talk and a lot of podcasts about that right now, and it almost makes me sad because I hate when those concepts become diluted or when
Yeah.
we start tuning them out because we hear them so often, but there's a reason they're talked about so much.
Well,
And
and I think a big reason for that is because like people are waking up to it and understanding more. And it's like it is an
right,
interesting topic because it's something that I think it's hard to study and it's hard to really like prove in a lot of ways for people
yeah,
until you've really learned the hard way as like a consumer or a client, right?
yeah,
Like my clients who have been through that kind of thing, and we've worked a lot on stress management and perception and like how we talk to ourselves, our inner voice and our
yeah.
ego and identity. Like those clients, they know the power of it because they've been through it and now they're on the other side of it for the most part.
And I think that, and again, I don't know if this is the case for you, but for me to get any sort of change from people, the very first thing I have to make sure is that they're not stuck in that survival state.
Yeah.
And it's not like black or white boxes for people, right? Like they exist in a continuum. But I think the very first thing that we look at in terms of creating change and letting physiology follow is like, let's shift where you are on that continuum a little bit.
Yeah.
Uh,
And it's
because
not
that,
going to happen overnight. That's
right.
something to consider and just like remind yourself and give yourself grace about is like, you're not just going to be a whiz at your stress management after one Loom video from me. Like,
Like telling, just don't stress, stress less. And you're like,
yeah,
how do I do that? No, I'm stressed about stressing.
just don't be
Uh,
anxious.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But in the world that I live in, that's enormous. And so
So what are some ways that you found or like an example you can give just like getting someone to the other side of that in
it
both the mental side and their physical whatever limitation they're working on.
generally with the physical limitation, that's kind of where like I have to go into my biomechanics brain, right?
Hmm.
But I also know that if that's all like if I don't want to say that's if the mind isn't right first, or at least moving the right direction, doesn't have to be right, but like going that way, um, biomechanics won't hold. And I
Yeah.
think that's where a lot of the I don't want to say that competitors that I have in the industry, because I don't again like there's no one that really does what I do. But the people who put out a lot of words on the internet and don't get results, that's what they're missing.
Mm.
Um,
The mental side of it.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
think even just like just acknowledging someone's pain point is huge because a lot of
Yeah.
times you think about when you're really dealing with something hard that's been prolonged, the
Hmm.
people who we hope support us the most are usually the ones who don't because they've heard about it.
Yeah.
Even just letting someone say, like, man, I hear you. That must be really hard. I can't imagine what that's
Empathy goes a
like.
long way.
For sure. There's a lot of safety in being seen and acknowledged. There was a mentor that I had back home. God, he was so good at aligning with people. He was a great therapist. Like he got flown into Nike and like the Oregon Ducks. I mean, guy is brilliant. But what made him so good was his ability to really connect with people. And he could
Mhm.
walk into a room, engage what he would call someone's kind of tone level, high tone, low tone, anywhere in between, so quickly. And his ability to match that tone level and like just align with them and then raise it was like an art that I've never seen. It's not like he was doing like voodoo. He was just so genuinely interested in that person. And I think that that's probably one of the things I do as well. That and dad jokes go a long way.
Yeah, dad jokes go a long way for
It kind
sure.
of fits everything.
Like the personality, like his personality, a big part of it was dad jokes, right? And if I think when people see an authority figure of some kind, whether it's a coach or a mentor or a teacher, whatever, if they can see the person's personality shine
Mm,
through, it makes them feel more real and relatable. And
yeah.
so that's something I feel like I've always felt like open about in terms of like my personality. And I think that that's helped me be where I need to be. And I think I see that in yourself too. Like you're a real person. You're not just a talking head. You're not just regurgitating someone else's content. And
Yeah.
going back to that subject is like, if you're just putting out content because it's the right thing to do and you're getting it from all these, templates or whatever, whoever else is doing similar content or similar role, then like you're not it's hard to be yourself when you're using someone else's words. So,
It's really interesting. I was at a business mastermind this weekend, and it's one of those where I'm like, how in the world did I get invited to this room? Because I'm in a room with a guy who's coaching the Olympics and a guy who coaches the MLB and a guy who coaches the NFL, and then there's me. And so the world that we live in is bodybuilding, it's content, it's social media, and
mhm.
room with coaches who are like locker room coaches.
Like
Really?
real shit coaches. Bodybuilding is
Right.
like it's a sport, but it's not like a real sport like
But
that, you know?
what I really, really loved is, and you're probably like this too, like you love knowing how to lead someone.
Mhm.
And they broke down in some talks, like basically how you can identify different types of athletes and like how you bring them to different places, how you speak to them differently. And it was a lot of kind of like organizational leadership kind of stuff, but that's the stuff that I geek out on. And I think that as
Yeah.
coaches, we think of ourselves as coaches. And again, like outside the world of bodybuilding, like coaching is a leadership role and a leadership position, and it's enormous responsibility. And so talking to these guys about, one of the visuals I have in my brain is um, there was graph with a quadrant system. And one was a sense of urgency in terms of time, like how much time they have, and the scale of impact this person is wanting to have. And you can break that up into four quadrants, and basically how you speak to and who you give your energy to as a coach so that you can serve the people who are like really ready to be coached is very strategic. And that was a little bit different for me to hear. And then he broke it up into 9 different spaces instead of 4. But again, listening to guys who are used to being in the room and the power of presence was a it was a really interesting take for me because of what we do being so remote.
Yeah.
Um, and it was just a really good reminder of how important the presence is in determining or just kind of feeling out someone's energy and how we meet them. So
Yeah.
just interesting.
Yeah, I think presence is hard for some people in our space too, because we work with such long-term goals or such
Right.
slow-moving goals. Because, someone comes to me and says, like, I want to get a pro card, but they've only been lifting for a year. Like, all right, we have a long ways to go, but you have to have that insight, but you also have to be super present. And for them
Sure.
to be present, us as coaches also need to be really present and not always just focusing on what's the next step, what's next step. And I think that goes for like business too, as a coach, is like the way to market yourself is not just to only focus, it's not to focus on the people you don't have yet, it's to focus on the people you have,
100%.
and being the best coach you can be for them. And we both see like coaches and gurus out there now that like basically say the opposite, and like their whole model is all about just like how to get more clients, how to get this much money per month, and so on and so forth. And
Yeah.
that's not staying present. And no shade to those people that, find success with that kind of thing, but in my mind, I'd much rather scale my business in a way that I can continue adding as much value as possible and not taking away, and also not being a different person than I am.
This is a really close touch point to me right now. For any listeners, before we get on the call, Rachel and I was just kind of talking about our day, and I'm at a point where my roster is overcapped,
Yeah.
and I know that I can't add more. I don't want to add more. I don't necessarily have like the income level that I want, but I know that in order to continue to serve people that are coming to me for help, the only option that I have is to bring on another assistant coach.
Yeah.
And I think there's a tendency within the coaching world instead to say, well, just get more efficient with your deliverable and to pull back on the value so that you can make more money.
Yeah.
And it's just such a backwards way of actually thinking about coaching. I've had to get very crystal clear on, my vision, what I want, um, between bodybuilding and powerlifting and, working with people who just want to be the jack dad and move better. I've got a really, really broad audience. And I've realized that to pursue what I want is probably going to be making less money than I want to make. And as coaches, we have to make sure that our actions are very much in alignment with our ideals and our core values. And it's wild to me how many people don't actually know what their core values are.
They don't
And
have them. Yeah.
yeah, right. Like
Yeah.
that's the woo.
Yeah, they don't have them. And I think it's partially because of how fast the industry moves and how fast people get into coaching. They get into coaching for the wrong reasons, right? They get into it because it looks like it's a fun job they can do from anywhere, and they can make lots of money, and they can do all these things, help people their body can make money for them, like all of these things. It seems really easy. And while some of those things, I guess, can be easy, at the same time, like it's not as easy keeping clients. And
Right.
I remember when I first started coaching, keeping clients was not as easy as I thought it was, because if you sign someone up and you set expectations that are not realistic because you have too much confidence in that person as a coach, like
Yeah.
that's where you're going to lose people, because
Yeah.
if you just say the things that you know that that client wants to hear in order to hire you, and you're not lying to them, you're not being, disingenuous, you're truly just telling them like, yes, we can do that, but you don't give them really set timelines and boundaries and like reality checks with that sell on that consult call,
Mhm.
then you're setting yourself up for a client that's going to last 3 months and then ghost you,
For
or
sure.
or less, right? And that client's going to be disappointed because they didn't get what they wanted from you. So then you have not only a client that's gone, but someone who wouldn't give you a good review or referral. And
Right.
that's what I found out early on is like, I really need to be brutally honest with people when they sign up, almost to the point where like, I don't want you to work with me if you're not going to listen to what I'm saying.
For sure.
And that's when I started pretty much closing every call that I get in terms of like, as long as it's a good vibe, like personality wise, they want to hire me because I'm telling them the thing that isn't necessarily what they want to hear. But it's going to make them more successful because they're getting set realistic expectations from the get go instead of just being told, like, oh, yeah, we can do that. No problem. Like, only to find out later, like, oh, no, we can't do that.
God, there's so much to unpack in that. There's a lot. Like if anyone's wanting to get in coaching, that's like the biggest nugget that yeah.
Yeah.
If you turn this into reels or media for yourself at all, use that nugget because there's so much to go into that.
Yeah.
Even
I talk about it a lot, and I think like especially as I've built my business, like I just started Refined Strength in October last year, and even before that, I've definitely had a lot of people reach out, come out of the woodwork, asking more or less like how I've done it, and what I think everyone looks like an overnight success,
yeah,
but they're not. Like when they're successful, they look like an overnight success, but you don't. They have it's because they haven't been paying attention, right? Like no one
building a
knew that I was
trajectory.
coaching without advertising it for like 3 years before I even joined Pro Physique. And then I did that for like 2.5 to 3 years before I started my own business. I coached people for free for a while. Like that's the
Yeah.
trajectory. Not everyone has to go that route, but it's definitely to get to where I'm at now, that's what worked for me. And that's not going to feel sexy or real fun to jump into coaching when that's the reality of the person they look up to.
I think people kind of forget, like for me, the many, many years that have
Yeah,
gone
20
down. Like
plus years doing what you're doing. Like,
it's wild. And so when I started writing for Lead FTS, Dave Tate is kind of a titan in the powerlifting, kind of a titan. He is the titan in the powerlifting
yeah.
world. And at one point, I was, one of the best in the country in my weight class, and there was literally one other girl in my class who was better than me. And I talked to David. I was like, man, I feel like I'm losing my traction because at that point, my whole identity was an athlete.
Hmm.
He was like, give it 2 years, she's going to burn out, and you're still going to be here. And the coaches who last and the ones who like keep showing up, I think, are the ones who have authentically and unapologetically been themselves. I'm a little bit like you, where someone gets on a call with me. I mean, I use that call to qualify them as a client. Hey, I'd love to work with you, but if we're going to make this work, I need you to really hand over the keys. If you're not willing to do that, I understand. That's okay. Reach out to me in 6 months.
Hmm.
But I was going to
How
ask you,
often do you get the people that don't sign up with you at that moment? Do you get them to come back in
if
those six
I'm
months?
if I'm honest, I've had a wait list. My roster's been overcapped for the last. I haven't brought on a new client since the end of 2022. I've brought on
Yeah.
like maybe one or two. I've had a wait list that whole time. My clients stay with me for 4 or 5 years. I think my longest running client's about 5 years now,
Yeah.
which is it's cool.
Yeah, that's huge. That's a testament to like you obviously knowing your shit, but there's so many people like your clients and people that aren't even your clients talking about you and the work that you do for them. And like I
I
think
try to
that's something
bring it
that
in.
people don't realize enough is like the power of just when you treat people right and you do your job and you win and stuff like that, like you can get so far.
Yeah, you really can. And again, like this has just been a passion project for me. It started as a passion project when I was working in a clinic. Um, but I think just really being authentic and genuine. Like you've seen me in the gym training with my husband. Like we love this. Like there's nothing I love more than if I can give like one nerdy cue to let this behemoth of a human not hurt. Like that to
Yeah,
me. Let's
it's
go.
huge. Especially when
Okay,
people have such a, like you talked about earlier, like they have kind of a mourning period for like what they could be if they weren't in pain.
right.
And I've suffered my own little injuries, tweaks, and pains and things like that. And I don't have nearly the obviously experience that someone like you does, but even just learning from different PTs that were really impactful for me in like what they've taught me, because there's definitely not everyone is the same in terms of quality and
Right.
what that how they're going to impact an athlete. who trains as hard as we do. But like that stuff has stuck with me for my entire career.
For
Things I
sure.
learned from someone in 2020, I still do today because I know it works really well for me. And
Yeah.
that helps me as a coach, it helps me as an athlete, and I can heal better and faster. And I don't have to identify with a pain I'm in or
Right.
injury I have because it's lingering or because I have it. I don't have to be the person that says like, oh, wait till you're 30, you're gonna, just start falling apart. The people falling apart at 30 are the people not fucking taking care of themselves and not delegating when they
Or
need.
they let me fix them.
Exactly. Yeah.
I can't tell you how many guys, like my favorite clients are these, middle-aged dudes who are like, oh, I'm not even middle-aged. I'm 34, I'm 35. Like, I can't lift hard like I used to
They
anymore. I'm
feel middle aged
like,
though.
what's that?
They feel middle aged though.
Right. And I'm like, give me literally like 2 weeks and the change. I mean, it's fun. That's what I love. And all of a sudden, I'm like, I can play with my kids again. Like, I don't hurt when I like tie my shoes. I'm like, great, let's
Yeah.
get back squatting heavier weight. Um, but I think you're hitting on something that's really important too. And that again, we always talk about how important it is for us to go through things and how our experiences shape us, right? And it develops not only an element of like now we have tools, but it develops a compassion
Hmm.
for our clients that are wrestling with the same thing. So for me, you know, going from arguably at the time one of the best powerlifters in my weight class, I think it was like top 10 in the world.
Yeah.
Um, I had a massive injury that didn't heal properly. We now know it's because of an autoimmune soft tissue thing that later on caused some serious medical issues. So I've gone through a loss of identity basically multiple times. And
Mm.
every time you go through that, you have to kind of reinvent the way that you think. And you have to reinvent the way that you approach the internal dialogue. And that's probably one of my favorite things that you do because I see you talk about it all the time. And I just really hope people find the value that you provide in that. And I'd love to hear what your cue was to go out on your own with your coaching.
So there were a few things I definitely, and thank you for all of that. Um, the biggest thing was there were a few like milestone moments for me. When I first started coaching full time for the last company, I was like, I knew that eventually I would probably be at a place where I could be on my own or like that I should be or whatever. But I had kind of like set that timeline for like far, far in the future, like
Mhm.
5 or so years past. Because I was just getting to the point of like, okay, I'm a full-time coach now. I need to spend this much time getting better before I can even think about doing it on my own, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I felt like I was kind of had training wheels on for a little bit. Um and those training wheels were really helpful for a while. Being sent leads because I hadn't made a name for myself as a coach yet, that was wildly helpful. And I used that benefit for sure. And I paid a split for it, right? I paid for a while a 50% split and then eventually got a raise to 60%. So 60% of what my clients paid me, I was making. And when I got
And
that
then you're
raise, I
paying
was
taxes
told,
too.
sorry, what?
And then you're paying taxes on that too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I
a
was
rough
at a
life. Been there.
1099, which is for anyone that knows, it sucks. Um, yeah. So I was told that that was the cap for me. And so that was the kind of thing that told me like, all right, so they're telling me if I want to make more money, I have to bring on more clients. But I'm really happy with the number of clients I have right now. Like I had gone to a place where I had gone higher than that current number. Like that number at that time was like 65 clients or so. And like just at a given time. And I had been at a higher level before that raise happened. I had gotten up, I think the highest I got up was like 85 clients at a time.
Oh
And
my
that
God.
still wasn't even high compared to some other coaches on the team.
God, that's
And
awful, man.
yeah, and so like to each their own, everyone is a little different in how they do things, but I found I was regularly burning out and feeling lots more negative thoughts and feelings and just side effects of that of having that higher number of clients. So that's why I dropped things back down and I didn't really try to go after that higher number again. But being told that that's the highest I'd get paid was hard to hear. And it didn't make me like feel negativity towards them as much. It did make me feel a little less valued but at the same time I was getting a raise, so it was a positive. So what I decided was I want to see what I'm made of and see if I'm able to sustain this with just myself. Because what am I paying this split for? I'm paying it for the brand, like the team and the team things, like things come with the team, and I'm paying it for like the leads, right? That's a big part of what I'm paying for. So I told our person that sent us leads and that matched clients with coaches, I said, I don't want any leads anymore. I just want to work on my own referrals and my own link on my Instagram. And I only want to get my own leads. If someone applies and they say, I want to work with Rachel, then I'll take them, but nobody else. Um, and so that was really
Data
helpful.
testing.
Huh?
That's good data testing.
Yeah, so it's just like that's what it was. It's like, let me see if I can do this. Because if I can't, I just go back to getting leads. I ask them for more.
Mhm.
And that's fine. And what I found was that like it challenged me to be better and more intentional with my content and with how I put myself out there, not only just for marketing and business purposes, but just for me and like what my voice sounds like online.
Yeah.
And just being more intentional about that because I've been on Instagram since like 2016 or 2017, and it's changed a lot since then. But for a long period, it was just me as a person, as an athlete, not me as a coach, as a business person.
Yeah.
And so just realizing like if I want to own my own business one day, I need to be able to like show up as a professional. And so a lot of it was that, and just like learning more about like how I'm going to how to treat my clients better so they give me referrals. Like I had one girl compete, Shay, last year, and I think I've gotten like 5 or 6 clients just because of her alone
Yeah.
over the last year. And those clients have then gotten me more clients because they recommend me. I had one girl start with me a few months ago, and only 2 weeks later, a friend of hers wanted to start with me too. Because in those 2 weeks, I had added that kind of value. So to me, it was really just about like, how can I just keep adding more value to my clients and to my content so that I can just, it happens more organically.
For
Um,
sure.
that was really it. That was like from there, more and more things started happening. I got invited to like speak more at seminars and talk more and like just I got to step more into a leadership role without being an official leader within the company. I would have coaches asking me for advice and asking to get on a phone call to like talk through some of my systems and processes, and like that made me feel good. It was a nice
Mm.
ego boost, but it was also just realizing that I am doing this right. And
Yeah.
I can keep doing it right, and oh, I can get a 40% raise if I do it right on my own. Cool.
Yeah. No
I'm
kidding.
gonna do
No kidding.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's funny. I'm thinking about, when I left working in the clinic to go space in the gym, it was a little bit opposite. I didn't have an existing like client base, basically. It was like, okay, you're gonna have to bet on yourself to make this happen.
Yeah.
You're going from a W-2 with health insurance and all of that. And um, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
It's kind
Just
of
figure it out.
Yeah, and it's been a ride. I'm not the kind of person. I think you know me well enough to know that like I'm not the kind of person who sits there and might like basks in my own confidence. Like that's just not me. It's never going to be
Yeah.
me.
You're a
Uh,
very humble person, and like you know how smart you are and how impactful you are. At least inside, I know you do, but
I
like
just kind of at this point where I don't really want to prove that to anyone by being really loud.
yeah.
Um, and so for me, like trying to get to work on my own was really hard. And I think it took up until, gosh, after we moved to Texas. So I've been on my own, or well, I guess let me back that up. Once I was in the clinical, like I was in that cash-based PT model, I also started online coaching with another company.
Right.
Mostly again for lead gen. The owner was awesome. I have so much respect for him. He's very, very smart. And he's probably one of the few people that on like a super nerdy level I can go toe to toe with. And
Hmm.
he challenges me a lot. Um, but same as you, I was making a commission and I kind of said, I'm bringing you so much more value to this company as a doctor of physical therapy who's a pro. Um, it was the instant raise kind of thing. And
Yeah.
if Lynn stayed with me, I was still sustaining my income level.
Yeah.
Um, they all came with, which was great. But I think it takes those sink or swim moments to really kind of figure out where we are. And I don't know, as women, I don't know if we process that a little bit differently than some of our male counterparts. I know in my world, most of, again, like my competition, they're mostly dudes.
Most of the men, yeah.
And it's in some ways, I play that to my advantage, where I'm like, what don't they do? Listen to people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to play up that card a lot. So what I
Yeah.
previously saw as a disadvantage in terms of being a female in a space that's really, really male dominant, was something that I was able to kind of capitalize on in terms of a strength. And that's probably the ways that I create the biggest amount of change for,
Hmm.
my guys that have had knee pain from 10 years from taking hits as a lineman, um, wanting to get on stage now. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I think it's a really cool thing when a female like yourself can capitalize on being a female, but in a super professional and like proactive,
Yeah,
productive way. Because a lot
yeah,
of people will, like women will do that, like capitalize on being a female in not such a professional way, and they'll use the cards they have to but for like just very surface level reasons, right?
yeah,
And you're using the cards you have because of what you know you can add value that you know most men are not adding value. Like a lot of the mental side of things, like the ways that you listen. Women are typically better listeners than men. Um, and you've been through a lot, and you also like you have a great relationship with your husband too. And like I think when this is something I've noticed like just over the course of years, I've watched a lot of coaches. If someone can have a really positive, productive, and like valuable reciprocal relationship with someone, whether it's a significant other or even just like their coach or mentor or something like that, they
yeah,
typically have better way like they're better at connecting to people. And
yeah,
so that's why it can be really good for them as clients or as coaches to clients. Clients can connect with them better because you just have better experience connecting with people and you do it on a
sure.
regular basis, right?
I think it's a big KPI too. Like if you're someone who's looking to hire a coach and it kind of looks like, you know, you, the circles we run in, if they're
Hmm.
high functioning circles, I think people can tell. Like I'm no longer working with my nutrition coach anymore, but we still have a great relationship. We were
Hmm.
business partners. He's still working with Dave. And I think that's again because in general, we're people who want to see other people win. And I think
Hmm.
there's a lot to be said for, like you mentioned, having that like functional, healthy, good relationship. People
Hmm.
don't have those relationships if they're
Or if they're
bad.
surrounded by drama all the time.
Right. Like you
Yeah.
don't people don't want to be around someone who's going to be who's going to take from them so much, right? So it's a good KPI that, if the people in the life care about them, that's a good one.
And I think some people that are that kind of person that's surrounded by drama or just like constantly having just very tumultuous relationships, whether business or personal, it they may get lucky for a long time where people kind of like want to play into that and like they want to be a part of that, not because
Yeah,
they want to be a part of the drama, but more because they just like they're those people that want the tea all the time and they just like
yeah,
it's almost like a cult like following that some people will have
for
because
sure.
of the drama, but also because of some of the value they provide, obviously. I've watched that a lot and I've watched those people kind of like really change and like their following change because of the way that they are.
Yeah.
And if you're known for something, what do you want to really be known for? If you
Say when
have
about you when you're not in the room.
exactly like how are people talking about you and thinking about you. I don't really care that much about what other people think of me. Like, if you like me, you like me. If you don't, you don't, whatever. But if I know that I can sleep at night because I'm a good person and I treat as many people well as I can and I do the right thing, then I know, like, I don't really have to worry about what people are saying. Because if they're saying anything negative, it's because of them.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
There's
So,
a level of security with that where we really have to recognize that what other people say about us is very often a reflection of what they're dealing with.
yeah, absolutely. So tell me more about like your journey as an athlete and how that has either like helped or hindered you in the professional world.
Gosh, where to start and how much detail to get into. I I think I'm in kind of a really weird spot right now too, because I very much consider one of my strengths as a coach the fact that I'm like in the trenches, very boots on the ground. I mean, like I'm training super hard. I'm trying to get really effing strong. I'm trying to prep and do as well as I can on stage, and I'm trying to do all these using somewhat novel methods. And right now I'm at a point to where my body is so beat up from last year and a couple of the other medical issues that I'm like allowed to train like 3 days a week at like 10 work sets,
Yeah,
like RPE 6. I'm
that's
like,
hard.
so I'm sitting here right now and I'm like, okay, am I modeling like for so long, this lead from the front mentality is like go harder, nose to the grindstone, dig deep. And I think that in the next year, I think we're really going to see the pendulum swing the other direction in terms of modeling different behaviors to our clients. And I like to
Mm.
think that in every opportunity, am I modeling what I would want my client to be able to see right now? And from the element of compassion, that's hard. From the element for me as an athlete, like, man, it's kind of a mind fuck. So I've not been in bodybuilding that long. I had my first show, I won that show, I turned pro my second show. My first season as a pro, I didn't do great. And then my second season as a pro, I made it to Olympia by some kind of miracle. Like I don't feel like I
It
belong
wasn't
there.
a miracle. Calm
No,
down.
it kind of was. Um,
Why do you
but
think it was a miracle?
I really didn't think that the look I brought to Chicago Pro was what I had potential to bring.
Hmm.
Um,
How do you figure in terms of like what do you think
conditioning.
was realistic for you to bring that you didn't?
Conditioning and stress management needed to be better. And there were a lot of reasons for that stress. Um, and I felt like there was just so much chaos surrounding my prep that I truly did not have control over. I mean, like
Was that chaos in like your training and your personal journey or like chaos just in life?
I'm very impressed that I'll say this. I'm very impressed I kept my shit together. When I look back at last year, I'm like, wow, I know I've grown as a person because of how I handled many things that I can't necessarily talk about on here.
Yeah.
Um, and in the background, we didn't know about the autoimmune stuff going on. You've seen me in the gym, and I think you've seen me during some of my episodes that happen.
Yeah.
And that was happening like routinely for a while, like every week, if not every other week.
Kind of tell yourself it's normal at that point,
That's
right?
exactly what I did. That I was like, it's just in your head. It is literally all in your head, and you're just crazy. No,
Yeah.
no. Your body's just really inflamed. Like really inflamed. uh,
Inflammation is a powerful drug.
because of a very mismanaged prep because of a coach that was too busy a little bit.
Yeah.
Um,
I've been there, so I know.
yeah. And so, looking at, the different injuries that have come on and powerlifting, tore my adductor tendon. At the time, no one was really talking about how to rehab that. And I was kind of told the way that it tore, where it scarred down, I had a bone fragment that was loose in there that fractured off my pelvis, was kind of told you're probably not going to squat again, at least not over like 225. And I was like, okay, well, I don't necessarily think that's true, but how do I go about problem solving this? So I've
Mhm.
had to use that opportunity among many others to basically get better as a clinician. And that's really what's formed I don't want to say like treatment model, but like my training approach as well for a lot of my clients, not all of them. Um, and now on the other side of that, where it's not just like I can get smart enough and rely on my intellect to figure out how to navigate a problem. And it's really like, no, sis, you just gotta sit down.
Yeah.
That's really hard. And I think we really get in the mindset of finding what can I do? What can I do? What action can I take to
Mm.
get better? But that
Yeah.
action is rarely like take better care of yourself. Um, it's something that we say to our clients all the time. But again, I think as coaches, the pressure to lead from the front when most people, or many people need to learn to work harder is one that I applied way too much to myself.
Mm.
Uh, I don't really know if that answered any of like the questions that you had. That was very open-ended, like thoughts on my end.
No,
Um,
I love it. That I mean, that's what I love about these podcasts is just like the ability to see inside someone's mind and like their thought process towards like how something happened and how things played out. And also just like the self-discovery that we can have just talking through some of those things. I
yeah,
know like I see a lot of parallels just in like how I handled my last prep. You know, I chose to prep when I was transitioning from corporate job to full-time coach, also freshly divorced, also moving
Yeah.
across the country to Texas and traveling for every show, obviously. I was working a lot of shows as well, so I was traveling for those. So like lots of travel, lots of like stress but at that time I felt like I'm great. I'm divorced.
I'm just
Life
gonna
is
keep
good.
going. Life is good. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm moving to Texas, it's great. But there's so much that was going on chaotically in my life because of that. And then I also had a coach that was too busy and too like far removed from where I was trying to go. And
Right.
so I too had like a very like I didn't win a pro show like you did, but I lost. And that was a big part of just like me realizing like you got to take a step back and really think about like, do you want this? Wanting something bad enough, I think, is something that can be like
Yeah.
almost toxic when a coach or someone says that, like, oh, you just didn't want it bad enough. But part of what I realized in that process and then since then is like sometimes wanting something badly means not wanting it as much
Totally.
and being willing to wait for it and understand that it's not going to come to us if we keep pushing in that direction. You have to like go back the other direction maybe or go just a totally different path and realize like you're going to find your way back eventually. And if you don't, it's because it wasn't the right path for you to begin with.
One phrase I use a lot with my clients is that sometimes we pull you back so that we can catapult you forward.
Yeah, like a
And,
slingshot.
it's funny hearing you use the phrase like you just didn't want it bad enough. I had the most, I'm at my best when I'm not like, you got to work harder, you got to, want it more. I tend to be at my best when I'm more grounded in the things that for me are important. Like my faith is what keeps me grounded in everything. It's my
Yeah.
security and it's the thing that allows me to say, the worst thing that happens if I lose, what? But in the Olympia prep, the last 8 weeks, this is, I think the last 8 weeks I was on no added fats. All of my meals were 150 grams of zucchini, 100 grams of chicken,
Yeah.
and 25 carbs pre-post. 8 weeks of that. And I'd been in prep basically all year. So like I knew at that point something was wrong. I did not come in condition for the Olympia, not because I didn't work hard enough, not because I didn't do my cardio, not because I cheated on my diet. My
You
body
had the
was
wrong
shut.
approach.
I was just shut down and I kept telling myself, you just have to work harder, which only made things worse. And
Mhm.
so I think that's very similar to the athletes that I work with that kind of hang on to this thing they want so tightly and don't know how to just set it down there so their hands can be filled with something better
Mm,
temporarily.
that's a really good analogy. Yeah.
Yeah, I've really hung on to that is that every time I have taken something I thought was really important, just set it down, there's usually something better that my hands are filled with.
Hmm.
And we forget to look up and see that. And I think mentally, when we get so hyper focused, hyper fixated, it becomes really hard to even think about what could be happening that I'm missing out on because I'm clutching on to something that isn't mine.
Yeah, it's not yours yet. Just because it's not yours now doesn't mean you can't have it.
Mhm.
But in order to get it, you have to do some other things first. You have to spend time holding and massaging those other things. I love that.
You have to
That's
spend
powerful.
time training 3 days a week at 10 steps per session. Very sad.
That it is sad, I agree, but I think that's
It's
like one of those,
purposeful.
it's helping you. It's helping you learn more like how to lead from the front in just a totally different way than you're
Very
used to.
much.
Because if you had to tell a client to do the same thing, you now have that experience or you're building that experience to be like, this shit works. I promise, I'm not just trying to like sabotage you. I think sometimes I almost feel like people think that's what we are doing. It's just
Or
like
that we're like,
hightailing
we're
them
just
to
trying
step
to give
back.
them the easy answer.
Yeah, yeah.
I have another coach that I work with to help me with my programming. We geek out together. He's amazing. His name's Chris Letmans. He was John Meadows' lead coach
Okay,
under so he's quality if he's
for
associated,
sure.
right? And Chris was like the glue that held me together last year. And what I've learned from him in that process and just his ability to see the athlete for where they're at is mind blowing to me. And it's very
Mm.
similar to when I walk into the room that I was in last weekend with these coaches who are coaching literally the top level. I mean, we're talking like 50, $60 million contracts in the MLB. Um, And it's just interesting to me how they can pick up exactly what's happening, but they can't do that until they've seen it or lived it themselves. And so I think there's enormous value when we go through as coaches and like, when you coach people, again, just seeing the content you put out and knowing you a little bit on a personal level. I just referred somebody earlier today for that reason, because you care and you understand what people are going through, and you also you're not going to sugarcoat things. And that ability to give, I don't want to say tough love because I think that has a weird connotation to it, but the ability to give honest information and
Mhm.
have an authentic conversation is one that's so lost in so many people.
Yeah, I think where clients are really, they think that coaches should just like tell them what to do, trust the process, and coach. A lot of coaches out there think the same things. Like, all I need is for the client to follow the plan. And sometimes, like, most of the time, yeah, that's what I need from you. But I also need more information. How are you following the plan? How does the plan make you feel? Do you hate the plan? It's like,
Yeah,
if you hate it, I need to know, and I
for
need to know
sure.
why. So then maybe it's not that I'm just going to change something because you're bored, but I might change something to make it still optimal for you and your goals, but also optimal for your happiness. Because at the end of the day, like, bodybuilding is a hobby. And that's something I've kind of adopted more of, and been working on a way to like put this to clients and people, is just like, bodybuilding is not that serious. And we're with social media and how people are just expertly curating this vibe of their competitive journeys, and how hard they work. They're going to war when they go to the gym. It's like, yeah, but that you're doing that for a trophy, like a plastic trophy. You're an adult doing all of this for a trophy. And like, yes, there's so much more that we can make it into. And that's what we all have, our strong whys in terms of why we compete. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to like still give energy to the rest of your life. If
Absolutely.
and giving that energy, it's kind of going back to your analogy of setting something down so you can pick it up later, or work on something else. Being able to set the intensity of bodybuilding and like the silly things about it down for a bit in order to like really put more energy and love into like healing an injury, or improving a marriage, or whatever it
Yeah,
is you need to work on, that can actually allow you to be better bodybuilder. Like, I've become a
yeah,
better bodybuilder implementing
absolutely.
like intuitive eating instead of just following a strict meal plan every day of my life. Like, life is too short for that. I'll have a margarita every once in a while, or go off my training program and work out with my wellness pro friend and do some hip thrusts when I know it's not in
Yeah,
the program. Like, doing those things, but still knowing that you're on the right track is really powerful. And I think people are super scared of doing that and worrying like, no, that they can no longer say like no stone unturned, but like, not every stone has to be turned.
there's such a rigidity to a lot of those phrases too that I think
Mhm.
it creates, like, if you hear enough of those phrases enough times, like no stone unturned, work harder, want it more.
Mhm.
What it does to your brain is shift you
Yeah.
so far into that sympathetically oriented, like protection oriented state.
Mhm.
And I think there's a lot of science that even shows that shifting out of that is really where the most creative work happens. And
Mhm.
that creative work, I don't mean creative like, art. I mean, like when you go to the gym and you train, you're probably going to feel things a little bit differently and go, oh, hey, I wonder if I put foot pressure just a little bit differently. Oh, yeah, there, my glutes better there.
Yeah.
And so it allows you to really enhance all the things you are doing. So I don't know. I think the verbiage that we use with those phrases freaking nailed it.
Yeah, it's huge. Like, how we speak to ourselves, how we speak to clients, how a client can learn to speak to their coach is a big part of
Yes.
how they can progress. And that's a like thing I nerd out on, is like when I see a client say something in a check-in, like, if I know that that's like, I think about what is it like writing that down to a coach?
Mhm.
Something like, I hate my body, or I feel fluffy, I feel this, like, I'm still dealing with this injury. I'm still dealing with this. It's like, what is that like writing that down? It must suck. So what can we do to improve your thought process before you write your check-in to me? It's not that I want you to hide your feelings from me, but I want you to work on like, are the feelings you're feeling really correct? Like,
Right.
could you maybe change your thought process, going back to like changing how you think and rewiring your brain a little bit? Because there's a lot of power in that that can transfer into your body, especially with
Absolutely.
things like digestion. That's a huge thing that I've
Yeah.
worked on and learned a lot about when it comes to like our mental health and our thought processes around everything in life and how that impacts our digestion.
That's one of those things that I always heard about and like knew on like some level again, just because of the medical background. But now that I'm living that, I'm on like a very, very deep gut protocol right now. I'm like,
Hmm.
wow, like again, all the things that people talk about, I gotta be honest, when people start talking gut protocol for a while, I kind of wrote them off because when I looked at how they trained and what they were doing, they didn't train hard enough for me to take them seriously. But that's because of my value system, right? Like my value
Right.
system is skewed that direction always.
Yeah.
But now that I'm in it, and the coach that I'm working with is like he's one who trains very hard too, so there's that shared, value. It's crazy how powerful this is.
Yeah.
And again, I think, if there's one theme I'm kind of picking up on things that I'm processing out loud with you, it's that a lot of the things that we hear on social media or that get talked about often that we become desensitized to and they start kind of going in one ear and out the other. There's
Yeah.
a reason they're talked about so frequently. And I think if we really stop and pause and think about, okay, this is clearly coming up often,
Hmm.
really exploring that is super important to do as a consumer.
Yeah. I think, yeah, we get desensitized to things being talked about a lot, but we have the power of looking at those things that are talked about a lot, or like, okay, why are they being talked about? They're being talked about because we're in an age of social media where like education is a big part of it
Yeah,
as coaches, and that can be annoying and frustrating because it's just so oversaturated, but at the same time it's really interesting because we can learn so much from other people and from ourselves, and as long as you can find someone or a group of people that you really like can align with values wise, but also just like
yeah.
their energy and like how they put out the content, you can really start to see like, all right, I can listen to this person. I can get a lot of value and education from this person on how they're talking about something like gut health. And I know it's not just bullshit them marketing to me. Because there are people that'll talk about it and they're just like trying to get as many people in to buy as many supplements as they can to fix their gut. And if it fixes them, great. If not, you just didn't work hard enough at your gut protocol.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Well, I know we have I think we've been on for like 2:20, something like that. But I know I have more work to get to. I don't want to keep you
Yeah.
for too long, but I could talk to you for so long about like all the things like just mind, body, soul. But I really appreciate you coming on and probably
Yeah.
ask you to come on again at some point, honestly.
Yeah, for sure. And seriously, thanks for having me, Rachel.
Yeah.
I hope that your clients know how lucky they are to have you. It's something that I think we've become desensitized to. Like we just kind of get used to our coaches, but I hope they know that they have truly one of the best. I hope you
And
hear that enough.
yours too, though, because like you said, there's nobody that really does what you do, and I think anyone who I doubt you have that many people that go to you and then go to someone else much because they're unhappy with you. But like I know that people who are missing out on working with you are truly missing out, and there's just so much for people to learn from you. So I hope you keep doing everything you're doing and helping
Oh,
people. And
thanks. Thank you
same.
very much.
Yeah. All
Well,
right,
thanks
guys.
for
Thank you
having
so
me
much.
on.
Follow Dani on Instagram. I'll have all of her information down in the show notes and everything. And just watch her content. Obviously, like she has a wait list to work with her, but watch out to see if she hires a coach soon to
Oh, they're coming on. So if you want someone who's been literally curated by me, they're going to be ready.
perfect. Bye.